Hello, and welcome everybody to a special edition of Books and Bytes. We're taking a deep dive into an interview transcript today, offering a really unique perspective from someone, well, right at the very heart of a highly scrutinized narrative, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, and this isn't just about, names and dates. It's really digging into the relationships, the money, the personal memories that kind of shape how we see these events.
Exactly. Our mission today is to unpack this chronologically, looking at themes like personal history, those controversial relationships, obviously, and how individual memory clashes sometimes with public allegations. You're going to hear details that, well, they might challenge what you think you know and give some context to a world often painted in really broad strokes.
What's quite compelling here, I think, is how tracing these events in order, as she tells it, reveals this consistent personal story. But it often stands in pretty stark contrast to the wider public view. We'll be trying to connect the dots, early connections, financial setups, properties, that social circle always asking, okay, so what does her version mean for understanding the bigger picture?
Right. It makes you think, how do individual experiences get shaped or maybe even overshadowed by that bigger collective narrative? So let's get into it. We'll cover Ghislaine Maxwell's recollections, her early career, meeting Jeffrey Epstein, the nature of their, well, complex relationship, her involvement in his finances and properties, and her specific take on the allegations about masseuses, underage women, and those high-profile names.
And we'll trace it chronologically, following her account, to see how she says the narrative unfolded and where she points out discrepancies with what most people believe. He gives you a full look at her side of the argument.
Okay, so let's start where her account does. 1990. Ghislaine Maxwell arrives in New York.
Yeah, she said she moved there initially to help her father with some advertising things, specifically related to the New York Daily News.
And interestingly, she drops in that she might have met Donald Trump around then.
Right. She mentions her father was friendly with him at Ivana. It sort of immediately paints this picture of a certain social scene she was in right from the start.
It sets the stage, doesn't it? Suggesting she was already moving in influential circles way before Epstein showed up.
Definitely. And that exposure kind of foreshadows the landscape she'd navigate later. Then, 1991, she meets Epstein. Her description is, well, very specific.
How so?
She says it was arranged through a sister whose boyfriend was apparently looking for a wife for Epstein because Maxwell was nearly 30. She called it a very important moment for a girl to, think about important things.
Huh. And the meeting itself?
At his Madison Garden offices. And the detail she remembers most. He was wearing a tie.
A tie. That seems mundane, almost.
Exactly. Which might be the point, right? Given everything that came later, focusing on such a normal, even formal detail could be seen as an attempt to frame that initial meeting as, well, conventional, ordinary, not the start of something notorious.
Makes sense. Then comes a really pivotal moment, her father's death in 1991.
Yes, and she goes back to New York to help with family business stuff. But what's really telling is what she says her father did before he died.
Ah, the vetting part.
Right. She emphasizes how protective he was, mentioning the IRA list, stalkers, and says he actually vetted Epstein. Called up people like Jimmy Kane and Ace Greenberg to ask about him.
Asking if it was okay that I even knew him, I think she said.
Yeah. That detail really works to bolster her narrative. It suggests Epstein passed a kind of background check by her protective father. The implication being, if he thought Epstein was okay back then, how could she have known any different?
It certainly frames her potential vulnerability and maybe her perception of who Epstein was initially. Okay, so let's shift to the business side. She said she ran that office.
Unequivocally, yeah. Indicating a pretty significant operational role, making sure things were up to snuff, as she put it.
That suggests real hands-on involvement, doesn't it? Trust, access, but also raises questions about what exactly she knew.
Absolutely. And the financial side was clearly significant, too. Deeply intertwined.
She mentioned a salary, right, ranging quite a bit.
Yeah, anywhere from $25,000 up to $250,000 a year. But beyond that, she talked about real estate deals. Epstein provided the money, she participated, and apparently made millions of dollars flipping land into houses.
Millions. Wow. And then there was that specific payment she mentioned.
The $18.3 million payment in 1999. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. She recalls the amount specifically, but claims she didn't know his purpose.
Which is striking for that amount of money.
It's a crucial part of her narrative, isn't it?
Yeah.
It lets her acknowledge the big money and her active role in his wealth creation, but simultaneously draw a line, saying she wasn't privy to the why behind certain large, potentially questionable transactions, like strategic memory.
A way to define the boundaries of her knowledge, perhaps.
Exactly. Implying she handled operations, but maybe not the underlying strategy or source of everything.
And how did she describe Epstein's wider business world?
She painted him as dealing with, quote, pretty much every financier. Mentioned Goldman, Lehman, big names, also his involvement with the Council on Foreign Relations.
That gives extraordinary access, she noted.
Right. And she even claimed Epstein ran New Albany, that big Ohio development by Les Wexner. She presents this as proof of his real work, countering any idea he was just a grifter. And she's emphatic. She never saw fraud herself.
So by highlighting these legitimate-seeming high-profile activities, she's trying to build a picture of Epstein as a respected player.
Seems like it. And therefore, her association with him seems less suspicious, more like standard business within that elite world she claims they were part of.
Okay, building on that legitimate picture, let's talk properties and lifestyle. The famous assets.
She confirms the portfolio. The New York brownstone, the Caribbean island, Palm Beach residence, the New Mexico ranch. Standard list.
But she goes into detail about the island, doesn't she?
Yeah, quite a bit. Described it as rustic at first. Said she loved it that way. But Epstein had completely different ideas.
Development plans.
Big time. Says the first couple of years were all about developing it. Architects, designers, construction crews constantly flying in. It shows her deep involvement in creating the physical infrastructure of his world. She wasn't just visiting, she was part of building it.
Tying her directly to those spaces that later became so infamous now. Really critical point she makes. The cameras.
Yes, very explicit on this. She stated firmly her belief that there were absolutely no cameras, no video cameras inside any of Epstein's homes, only outside security cameras.
That's a direct hit against a major public perception, right? The idea of secret recordings everywhere.
Absolutely. It's a forceful denial aimed at dismantling a key part of the narrative around Epstein's methods. By saying, I was there and they didn't exist, she's challenging a widespread belief head on. It makes you pause and consider her specific claim against the general assumption.
A very strategic denial. Okay, this leads us right into the masseuse allegations, a central part of everything. Where does she say this all started?
She pinpoints it very precisely. December 2001. And she attributes the origin to one specific, though redacted individual who came to Epstein's house as a masseuse.
So she frames it as having a very specific, contained starting point.
Exactly. Not some long-standing organized thing from the beginning, but starting with this one person at this one time.
And she gives quite a backstory for this first person, too.
Remarkably detailed, yes. According to Maxwell, this woman was engaged, broke up, got involved with a drug dealer, got arrested for theft, had a warrant,
Wow.
and then called Epstein for help. And he supposedly sent her to Thailand to get a massage license.
That's quite the narrative. What's the effect of telling it that way?
Well, by framing the first masseuse as someone already in trouble who sought Epstein's help, it attempts to cast the dynamic as maybe patronage or providing opportunity, rather than exploitation from the get-go. It tries to create a context where his actions might seem, at least initially, different.
Setting a different tone for how these arrangements began.
Right. And she claims this continued. When this first masseuse returned, Epstein supposedly asked her to find a replacement. And that replacement, Maxwell says, was one of the accusers in her own trial.
And that everyone else came in similarly after that, like a chain.
That's her claim, a chain of introductions originating from that first person.
And Epstein's rationale, according to her, why younger people?
She said he liked being around them because they gave him new ideas, kept him current on things like music. He found their company invigorating.
So framing it as intellectual curiosity, essentially.
That seems to be the attempt, to normalize his preference by presenting it as something stimulating rather than predatory, sanitizing the motive.
Which brings us to her own involvement. What did she admit to and what did she deny?
Okay, this is critical. She confirmed being in a massage room sometimes with Epstein and a masseuse, so presence acknowledged.
What?
But she categorically denied ever recruiting underage women or going to schools to do so. She admits introducing women to him, but insists not underage women.
That distinction is key, isn't it? Women versus underage women.
Absolutely crucial for her defense.
Yeah.
She's trying to draw a very sharp line. Maybe she facilitated introductions, yes, but she's claiming she consciously avoided minors or was unaware if any were involved. It's a careful parsing of words to limit her alleged culpability.
And she didn't just issue a general denial about ages. She got specific.
Extremely specific. She directly rejected testimony that girls were 14, 15, or 16 when introduced. She brings up one specific accuser called Kate in the transcript
Yeah.
and claims she actually met this person when she was 20 or 21. Therefore, she argues, an alleged 18th birthday card from Maxwell couldn't exist. Her conclusion, quote, "The entire testimony of the 14, 15, and 16-year-old is, therefore, not accurate."
Wow, that's a bold claim based on one alleged discrepancy.
It is. And she goes further, saying her experience with this one accuser, which she insists is false, tainted her view of all the other testimony later on.
So the strategy is discredit one key accuser and hope it casts doubt on everyone else.
Precisely. If you can poke a hole in one part of the prosecution's case, you try to make the whole thing look unreliable. It's a classic defense move.
Okay, let's move to the high-profile connections. Bill Clinton, for instance.
She states she met him after he was president, around 2002-2003. She says she connected him with someone running Davos, the World Economic Forum, about an idea similar to Clinton's global initiative, but insists it wasn't her idea for CGI itself.
And how did she describe Clinton's view of Epstein?
As just seeing him as a rich guy with a plane. That's the phrase she used.
Again, trying to portray these connections as superficial, based on wealth and convenience, not shared secrets.
Seems like it. Implying these powerful people were just using the jet, essentially unaware of anything darker. It helps insulate them, and by extension her. Oh, and she flatly denied ever seeing that infamous painting of Clinton in a blue dress, called it hideous, said she only learned about it from the press.
Another specific denial about a widely reported, albeit bizarre detail. What about Prince Andrew?
Vehement denial there, too, specifically about anything inappropriate happening at her London house in March 2001. And her defense is fascinatingly physical.
Physical? How?
She describes the house in minute detail. Incredibly small, the size of a nut, she said. 3 floors, originally a stable. Claims any tiny noise, even a little burp, would echo everywhere.
So impossible to keep secrets.
That's the argument. And she focuses on the bathroom tiny, all mirrors, like a fun house, where you'd see 100 of you. She argues the alleged activities would have been impossible to conceal in such a space.
And she disputes the date.
Yeah, she believes the March 2001 date was picked just to match flight logs, not because anything actually happened then. It's an incredibly detailed, almost architectural alibi. She's using her intimate knowledge of the space to try and make the accusation seem physically impossible.
That level of detail is certainly arresting. Any other connections she mentioned?
A few others, yeah. Reid Hoffman, the Silicon Valley guy, known through friends. Henry Joricki, a financier who cornered the silver market and happened to have an island near Epstein's, showing their proximity to other wealthy figures. Chris Cuomo, known through his marriage to a Kennedy. And Chris Tucker, the actor who she traveled with on that Africa trip with Clinton.
So reinforcing that image of a sprawling network across finance, tech, politics, entertainment.
Exactly. Bolstering the idea that Epstein, and she with him, moved in what seemed like, on the surface, legitimate high-status circles.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the investigation itself and the personal impact she describes. How does she say she learned about it?
Interestingly, not from Epstein. She claims she first heard Epstein was being investigated from the Houseman. And her reaction, she didn't even understand what that meant at the time.
Suggesting she was initially out of the loop? Or perhaps downplaying her awareness?
It certainly frames her that way, as somewhat removed or oblivious when the legal trouble first started brewing, not an immediate insider to the crisis.
And how does she describe her relationship with Epstein evolving around that time?
She noted the physical relationship ended, though she kept working for him. Said her life became separate from his, except where their paths happened to sync.
Implying a growing distance, a shift to a more professional footing.
That seems to be the narrative she puts forward. A gradual separation, allowing her to argue that her continued work didn't mean she knew about or endorsed everything in his personal life, especially any alleged later activities. It's a narrative of diverging paths.
And then regarding her own legal battles.
She talks about actively seeking answers and documents or information for her defense. And she also includes some pretty stark descriptions of her time in custody.
What kind of descriptions?
She mentions experiencing mismanagement and inefficiencies and total dereliction of duty at the Bureau of Prisons and perceived safety threats, like a prisoner potentially being paid just $25 for a hit with a lock.
Including those details about prison conditions, what effect does that have?
It subtly casts her as a victim of the system, doesn't it? Adds another layer to her narrative, portraying her not just as someone accused, but someone suffering under harsh and dangerous conditions. It complicates the picture.
So we've really walked through her entire account, from arriving in New York, meeting Epstein, the business dealings, the properties, her specific framing of the masseuse issue, the high-profile names, and finally the investigation's impact on her.
Yeah, it's a dense narrative, rich with details where it serves her like the London house layout or the backstory of the first masseuse, and sometimes marked by, let's say, strategic gaps in memory, like the purpose of that huge payment.
It really forces you, the listener, to grapple with these different layers of truth and perception she presents. Her perspective on the finances, the development, the social scene, her denials. It's a meticulously constructed story.
And connecting it back to the bigger picture, what really resonates is how powerful individual memory or the presentation of memory is in trying to shape understanding. You heard her use tiny details about her house or challenge an accuser's age to try and undermine a massive public narrative.
It shows a clear strategy, doesn't it? To build an alternative account that consistently minimizes her role, reframes motives, and chips away at the public record.
Absolutely. And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? In complex stories like this, how much weight do we give to these detailed personal counter-narratives versus the established story? It really highlights the challenge of discerning truth when faced with such a deliberate, carefully crafted defense woven from memory and selective detail. What parts are recollection and what parts are reconstruction? That's the lingering question.